Mr. Farage now, on behalf of the FDD group.
Thank you. Well, I can see that you're all very upset here this afternoon, and I've no doubt that the events in the USA over the last few weeks have been a very profound shock to you. Perhaps you're right. You see, what has happened here is somebody has stood on a manifesto for election, got into office, and within 1 week said that he will hold faith with his own electorate. It is called genuine democracy. Unlike the system we have in the European Union, where the unelected commissioners like Mogherini here have the sole right to propose legislation. So I'm sure that it's a great shock to you to see that a genuinely elected Democrat is doing what he was put in to do. And it must be, I would think today in Washington. Sorry. I can't hear you, mate.
Di questo Parlamento e delle funzioni istituzionali.
This Parliament has institutional functions, as does the Commission, out of institutional respect to the Commission, but also as a result of the Commissioner's President. We need to be polite, please. So, thank you.
And out of institutional respect, President, to the truth, perhaps you will understand and agree with me that within the European form of lawmaking, it is the unelected Commission that have the sole right to propose legislation. If I'm wrong in saying that, you can throw me out of this Parliament right here, right now, this afternoon.
Mr. Farage, I am just asking you to be a little bit more respectful, please. Thank you. You may continue.
Oh, I'll be respectful, all right. And perhaps you will be too, for the right of the leader of a political party that won the European elections in the United Kingdom in 2014. Now, it seems to me that actually, with all the anti-Trump rhetoric that is coming from everywhere, actually what we're hearing is the true nature of the European project, which is genuine anti-Americanism. Trump is motivated by protecting the United States of America from Islamic terrorism, whereas what has happened in this room and in governments around Europe is you have welcomed these people into your own homes. But can we please, just for a moment, look at the facts? Amongst all the hyperbole and the hysteria, all that Donald Trump has done is taken 7 countries that were identified by President Obama as posing a risk to the USA. Obama already had put in place extreme vetting. What Trump has done is for 90 days to say, let's examine that vetting and see whether it's good enough. But I want to ask you, Mr. Verhofstadt, and all the others, with your faux outrage today, where were you when Obama in 2011 banned any Iraqi from going into the country for 6 months? Why do I hear no criticism in this chamber or from the Commission of Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, Bahrain and others who refuse to take a single, not one, refugee or displaced person from Syria? And how can it be that on Holocaust Day, last Friday, not a single one of you criticised the 16 countries in the world that ban Israeli Jews from even going to their country on holiday? What is this hypocrisy? So perhaps what we need to do, Mr. President, and through you to the members, perhaps what we need to do is to be a little bit more constructive. All of us here say we're Democrats. Well, here's a chance to prove it. Let us invite President Trump to come here to this European Parliament. I'm sure as Democrats you'd all agree that what we need to do is to have an open dialogue with the newly elected, most powerful man in the world. And if you throw that rejection back in my face, then you prove yourself to be the anti-democratic zealots that I always thought you were. Good morning. Good morning. Funny, isn't it? Funny, isn't it? Thank you very much for that very warm welcome. How things have changed.
Just a second, Mr. Farage. Ladies and gentlemen, one major quality of democracy is that you listen to those, even if you don't share their opinion.
Well, thank you, Mr. Schulz. Isn't it funny? You know, when I came here 17 years ago, and I said that I wanted to lead a campaign to get Britain to leave the European Union, you all laughed at me. Well, I have to say, you're not laughing now, are you? And the reason you're so upset, the reason you're so angry, has been perfectly clear from all the angry exchanges this morning. You, as a political project, are in denial. You're in denial that your currency is failing. You're in denial. Well, just look at the Mediterranean. No. As a policy to impose poverty on Greece and the rest of the Mediterranean, you've done very well. And you're in denial over Mrs. Merkel's call last year for as many people as possible to cross the Mediterranean into the European Union has led to massive divisions between countries and within countries. But the biggest problem you've got, and the main reason the United Kingdom voted the way that it did, is you have, by stealth, by deception, without ever telling the truth to the British or the rest of the peoples of Europe, you have imposed upon them a political union. You've imposed upon them a political union. And when the people in 2005 in the Netherlands and France voted against that political union, when they rejected the Constitution, you simply ignored them and brought the Lisbon Treaty in through the back door. What happened last Thursday was a remarkable result. It was indeed a seismic result, not just for British politics, for European politics, but perhaps even for global politics too, because what the little people did, what the ordinary people did, what the people who have been oppressed over the last few years and seen their living standards go down, they rejected the multinationals, they rejected the merchant banks, they rejected big politics, and they said, actually, we want our country back, we want our fishing waters back, we want our borders back, we want to be an independent, self-governing, normal nation, and that is what we have done, and that is what must happen. And in doing so, we now offer a beacon of hope to Democrats across the rest of the European continent. I'll make one prediction this morning. The United Kingdom will not be the last member state to leave the European Union. So the question is, what do we do next? Now, it is up to the British government to invoke Article 50. And I have to say that I don't think we should spend too long in doing it. I totally agree, Mr Juncker, that the British people have voted. We need to make sure that it happens. But what I would like to see is a grown-up and sensible attitude to how we negotiate a different relationship. Now I know that virtually none of you have ever done a proper job in your lives, or worked in business, or worked in trade, or indeed ever created a job. But listen, just listen.
Herr Farage, Augenblick. Mr. Farage, just a second. Ladies and gentlemen, I do understand that you're getting emotional, but you're acting like UKIP normally acts in this chamber, so please.
Kopieren Sie sie nicht, Herr Farage. Ich will Ihnen allerdings eins sagen. Ihre Äußerung,
however, I would say
dass
one
die
thing to
Kollegen hier
you.
in diesem Hause niemals einen ordentlichen Job gemacht hätten,
The fact
die müssen
that
nicht von
you're
sich auf andere
claiming
schließen. Das
nobody
geht
has
so
done
nicht.
a decent job in their life, you can't really say that. I'm sorry.
No, you're quite right, Mr. Schulz. UKIP used to protest against the establishment, and now the establishment protests against UKIP. So something has happened here. Let us listen to some simple, pragmatic economics. We, between us, between your countries and my country, we do an enormous amount of business in goods and services. That trade is mutually beneficial to both of us. That trade matters. If you were to decide to cut off your noses, to spite your faces, and to reject any idea of a sensible trade deal, the consequences would be far worse for you than it would be for us. And even no deal is better for the United Kingdom than the current rotten deal that we've got. But if we were to move to a position where tariffs were reintroduced on products like motor cars, then hundreds of thousands of German workers would risk losing their jobs. So why don't we just be pragmatic, sensible, grown up, realistic, and let's cut between us a sensible tariff-free deal, and thereafter recognise that the United Kingdom will be your friend, that we will trade with you, we will cooperate with you, we will be your best friends in the world. But do that, do it sensibly, and allow us to go off and pursue our global ambitions and future. Thank you.
EFDD, Mr. Farage.
Well, Mr Barroso, 10 years we've been trading blows in this Parliament, and indeed I'm the only person on today's speaker list that was involved 10 years ago. And I found you, I have to say, for the vast majority of that time, very civil, but often bemused by what I've had to say and by events in Europe as they've unfolded. In fact, I remember the first speech I gave. You presented your new Commission, and I pointed out to you that your nominee from France, Mr Jacques Barrot, was in fact a convicted embezzler who had received a 2-year suspended prison sentence and been barred from public office. And my shock at that moment was that you simply showed me in your face you had no idea that it was true, but of course it was. Perhaps that comes from your early days as an active student Maoist, where you believe in big ideas that don't perhaps have much practical reality. But I've enjoyed much of what you've said over the years. Indeed, I particularly enjoyed you the day after the Irish, the only country indeed that had a referendum on the Lisbon Treaty, when the Irish voted no to Lisbon. And you stood up and said the Irish didn't really mean no, and I particularly enjoyed that. I also enjoyed you saying that the European Union was the first ever non-imperial empire, because in that you showed so much of what this project has now become. I don't think anybody doubts that those that got together in the 1950s after 2 ruinous world wars with the genuine intention of getting the French and Germans to sit round the table, talk together and trade together. No one doubts that was the right thing to do, but it's morphed and changed into something else. And it's your analogy to an empire that indeed has led to the current failure. It is the extension to allow in more and more countries. It is the expansion of the Eurozone to let in Mediterranean countries that should never have joined in the first place and that are now suffering so horribly. So I view you as a fantasist, but at no point have I ever implied that you were dishonest. You're not. You're very honest indeed. I remember you telling Martin Callanan, who led the Conservative group here for some time, as the Conservative Party under David Cameron's leadership became more Eurosceptic with each British parliamentary by-election, and you telling Martin Callanan, look, don't try and be like UKIP, because actually the voters will go for the real thing, and you were right, we won the European elections. But But thank you for last Sunday, thank you for appearing on British television, thank you for confirming that the real fantasist isn't you, it's David Cameron, the British Prime Minister, who pretends that we can restrict free movement and remain members of the European Union. You made it clear that he was wrong, he was deceiving the British people, and you made it clear that you were the boss and not him. And for that I thank you and wish you a very happy retirement indeed.
Vielen Dank für die